Chapter 4 of The Web of Indian Life by the Sister Nivedita, Margaret E. Noble. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4. Love Strong as Death. As to the skies that center in the polar star, so to the Eastern home the immovable honor of its womanhood. Here is the secret of that worship of the mother in which all union of the family and all loyalty to its chief are rooted. Women in the West may thirst for the glory of love or the power of wealth. In Asia, her characteristic dreams are of perfectness and purity of faith. Woman in the West is a queen, exposed to the fierce light that beats upon a throne, putting to good or evil use the opportunities of sovereigns. Even queens in the East are too sacred to be looked upon by common eyes. They grow like the tall white lilies of Annunciation, set in the dimness beside some altar, screened from the very glances of the faithful at their prayers. The long silken tent through which such ladies move from palace door to carriage step is no vulgar prison but a shrine. Bereft of its concealment, they would feel dishonored, unprotected, as does the widowed gentlewoman compelled to fight for bread amongst the struggling crowd. The very possibility of this blaze of publicity shed on a delicate hybrid womanhood is repugnant to the Oriental mind. Remoteness and shadow, silence and obscurity, seem to it the true environment of holiness. And woman is held to be so much a sacred mystery that no man may even mention the name of another's wife to him. Are they at home all well? Is the guarded form which the necessary inquiry for her health has to take. The outer courts of the house, where the men pass the day, the veranda and the stoop, where neighbors meet and chat, these are but public places. Here the intellectual life may be lived, and civic affairs transacted. But it is by the cool gray threshold of the inner, the woman's rooms, that the world of home is entered. And what an ocean of passionate love surges through the quiet walls. Here the wife listens for the feet of the returning husband. Here the widow sobs for him who will return no more. Here scamper home the babies to find mother or aunt, grave elder sister, or twin-souled younger comrade. Here youth lays its plans and bridges its perplexities, while old age looks on, with the quiet eyes of experience and of faith. Here passes in short all that mingling of smiles and tears, of laughter and prayer, of charm and weariness, that goes to make up the bittersweet sacrament of daily life. Only the art of medieval Holland speaks a passion for home as ardent as this of the Orient, which as yet has found no voice. Standing without in the noonday hush and looking into the semi-darkness of the woman's apartments, it is as if one caught a glimpse of some convent garden, full of rare and beautiful flowers. This is the woman's hour. Their natural guardians are all absent, sleeping or at business. Only in the outer court a drowsy servant guards the entrance. An air of innocent raillery, of delicate gaiety pervades all. Friendly confidences and gentle fun are being exchanged. It is now that the long melancholy cry of the peddler is heard, with his "bracelets and bangles, who wants?" or good cloth, or what not. And the wandering merchant may be called in, to add amusement to the moment by his baiting and bargaining. Noonday passes, and slender widows in their long white veils fall to telling their beads, unnoticed and absorbed. Here and there a mother glides away to prepare for the children's coming home from school. The sound of laughter and talk dies gradually down, and afternoon wears on to evening, and the hour of prayer. So passes the day's drama, and with all its blending of subdued tints from dainty rose to ashen gray. Yet almost all the windows of the home look inwards. The 4 blank walls enclose the whole. True indeed it is that silence and shadow are the ideals of this, the life of Eastern womanhood. But the ideal itself, that it may be fixed and perpetuated, requires its culminating types and centers, its own duly consecrated priesthood, whose main task in life shall be to light its lamp and wait upon its altar. And such persons in the world of Indian women are the widows. Literature consists largely of a man's praise of woman in relation to himself. Yet it remains eternally true that this heroine of man, Helen, Desdemona, Beatrice, is but one modification or other of her who goes unseen, unhymned, unnamed, the woman of solitude, the woman who stands alone. Neither Europe nor the modern spirit can claim the glory of having created the idea of woman as an individual. Queen Hatassu had it in ancient Egypt. In still older Chaldea, Semiramis had it. In the sagas of the North, it is true, no woman goes unwed. But no sooner does Christianity, the mission of the Asiatic life, appear amongst us than medieval history blossoms into its Hildas and Teresas and Joans, its Saxon Margarets and its Spanish Catherines. It is the self-protecting woman only who is born perhaps of the 19th century. Of old it was held by Frank and Saxon, by Latin and Teuton, that she who did not marry needed the protection of the Church. And in Asia to this day, it is believed that she requires the sanction of the religious life itself, though that life be lived for the most part within the community house. For the only unmarried woman in India is the widow, and especially the child widow, that is, one whose betrothed has died before actual marriage. A kind of faithfulness is implied in this, which is quite different from the faithfulness of the West. There it is counted for great fidelity if amidst the growing complexities of life there run the stream of a strong and constant memory, if the bereaved wife be true to the idea for which the husband stood, if she carries his name as a banner, whose new adherents are won by the power of her own consecration. In India no growth of complexity can be permitted. Where the life stood when its companion was smitten down, there it must remain, till a second death completes the releasing of that one being who only seemed to others to be two. How wonderful is death! So cold, so still. The mind is withdrawn from its senses and steadied, that enters its presence but for a moment. They who dwell there find release into a great calm. The Hindu widow lives out her life with her soul ever present at the burning ghat, her white sari, unbordered, her short hair, her bareness of jewels, her scant food and long prayers, her refusal to meet guests and join in festivities. All these things are but the symbols of its abiding lights and shadows. She has found her vocation, so to speak, and as a nun must henceforth direct her life. If she be a child widow, this is only the more true. Then the church in which she lingers is more apt to be the thought of the divine itself. But if her widowhood can remember what it was to be a wife, her altar will be the name of the dead husband, and her austerities will carry with them the unspeakable gladness of the memory that half of all their merit goes to him. This belief in a mystic union of souls was the motive of Suti, a sacrifice that was supposed to lift the husband's soul at once into bright places and bring his wife to enjoy them beside him for thousands of years. Who, with such an idea deep ingrained, could not laugh at fire? It is clear that this scheme of a widow's life is inherent in a great simplicity. A marriage which had but one duty could alone have led to this bereavement which has but one thought. And yet we must understand that it is in this terrible blight of love that the strong woman finds her widest individual scope. It is told of Bhaskaracarya, the mathematician, that he had but one child, the maiden Livavati. Casting her horoscope carefully, he discovered that there was only a single moment in her life when she could be married without fear of widowhood. Preparations were made for the wedding accordingly, and the father himself constructed an instrument by which to regulate the time of the ceremonies. Water would be admitted drop by drop through a certain hole, from one pot to another, and its reaching a given height was the signal for the sacramental act. The marriage rites began, but the child Livavati grew tired and went wandering from room to room in search of amusement. In some obscure corner she came upon an unaccustomed-looking pot, and leaned over its edge to watch how the inner section was gradually sinking in the water which it contained. As she did so, a tiny pearl fell all unnoticed from her wedding crown, and stopped the hole through which the water passed. Time went on, but the vessel sank no further. "Ah!" exclaimed Bhaskaracarya sorrowfully, when, the hour already past, he found the jewel that had frustrated all his caution. "It is useless for a man to fight against his destiny." Within some few weeks or months the little bride was left a widow. But now her great father resolved to make of her a woman so learned that she should never sigh for earthly happiness, a resolve in which he succeeded to such an extent that to this day It is not known whether the abstruse treatise named Livavati was merely dedicated to her, or whether she asked the questions to which it contains the answers. This story is historic, but simple instances abound in every village. The kind widowed aunt who lived in the opposite house to ours, did she not count every soul in the Calcutta lane, together with her brother's children, as her own? "Do not leave this country," she would say to some number of our household every now and then, "for you know I count you all my bairns." When the man in the next house died of cholera, it was not we, the European neighbors, but this Pishima of ours who was first on the scene with disinfectants. When the immediate necessity of cleansing the whole house was explained, it was still another and older widow lady who listened, and carried out the work with her own hands. Indeed, wherever one is called in time of need, one finds a group of widow women already present. There is no act of nursing that these are not ready, and even eager, to perform, no disease so loathsome or dangerous that they will not gladly take a sick child into their arms, no injury so bitter that it will prevent their weeping sorrowful tears of sympathy with the injured in his hour of pain and loss. It is quite natural that widows should be more free for the civic life than other women. Wives have their husbands' comforts to attend to, and mothers their 1,001 maternal cares. But the widow, and above all the childless widow, in her agony of solitude, can hear the sobs of children not her own, can stretch out hands across the desert of her own mourning to those who are ill, or in poverty and desolation. In the last generation, lonely women had still more scope than they have now. I have heard of one who never sat down to the midday meal till a servant brought her word that every soul in the village had already eaten. Almost every family can remember some aged dame of its own, who was famed for her skill in all sorts of remedies for man and beast. The very cow goddesses, who are worshipped in Himalayan villages in time of cow pestilence, may have been actual Hindu women of this type, raised to the rank of deities. But the last half-century in India has been rapidly accomplishing the decay of the middle classes, and with this decay, brought about by the shrinking of wealth in its old channels, the fall of women in social and material power proceeds apace. Yet still the widows represent the intellectual centers amongst women. The more modern they are, the less likely it is that they can reel off Sanskrit verses, but more probably that they read books in the vernaculars. In any case, they produce the saints, and the position of a woman saint in India is such that no man in her neighborhood will venture on a journey without first presenting himself before her veiled form, taking the dust of her feet, and receiving her whispered blessing. Widows have constantly distinguished themselves, especially in Bengal, as administrators of land and wealth. Of this pattern was the great Maratha queen of Indore, Ahalya Bai. Her husband died while waging war with Scindia and another, and her first act was to disband her armies, and send word to the sovereigns that she was at their mercy, a defenseless woman. The expected result followed, in the complete abandonment of all hostilities. After which Ahalya Bai Rani lived and reigned for many a long year, eating the Hindu widow's handful of rice of her own cooking, and spending her great revenues in public works on the largest scale. For the wife becomes regent when a man dies during the minority of his son, and even if the latter be already of age, his ownership of an estate is by no means free and complete during the lifetime of his mother. The whole world would cry shame if he acted without her occasional advice, and indeed, the Indian woman's reputation for business capacity is so like the French that it is commonly said of encumbered property that it needs a widow's nursing. In such a case there is, however, for the wealthy woman, one temptation. Throughout her married life, her relation with her father's house has remained close and intimate. At least once a year, if not oftener, she has returned to it on visits. Her eldest child was born there under her own mother's care. Her girlhood's friends have perpetually renewed their youthful memories by hastening to see her on her arrival and talk over old times. It was many a year before the revival of familiar associations ceased to make her wholly a child again, so that she would run bareheaded down the lane to a neighbor's house, rejoicing in the unaccustomed freedom of the fact that the only men she was likely to meet were practically her own brothers, for she had played with them in babyhood. But if the relation to her early home and to her past be thus deep and exquisite, what are we to say of the bond that knits together the Hindu sister and her brother? Here is the tie that offers to the woman of responsibilities her great temptation. For it is considered hard and yet essential for one who administers a dead husband's wealth not to bestow it in these channels, not to submit to management and direction, not to transfer possession gradually from the one house to the other. And the very insistence upon the dishonor of such a course is in itself testimony to the affection that tempts. The perfect wife is she who loves her husband with a love that forgets even father and brothers if need be. But how arduous is such perfection to obtain! Because on it sisters are visited and give their benisons. And so, even about the detached life of the married woman, made independent of her father's care, early associations continue to twine and grow stronger. They never cease to be an organic part of her life, and if the stress of her existence throws her back upon them, she knows that on which she leans, that it will not fail her at her need, or prove a false staff breaking in her hand. And yet her natural longing in the first days of her widowhood is to remain, unless forbidden by his poverty, in the household of her father-in-law, for herein lies all her loyalty to the dead. Nay, it will often happen that even a child widow is anxiously retained by her husband's parents, as a token in some sort left by him who is gone. All the glory of womanhood lies in such things as these. Even in her own home, too, a widow has the right to be exacting on 1,000 little points regarding her dead husband. Do her father and brothers not remember the great days of obligation of the household into which she married? Do they require a reminder, instead of hastening to be beforehand with her, in suggesting the gifts and offerings she would do well to send? Ah, then, is it only herself for whom they cease to weary themselves, or do they forget his dignity, who should be as dear as their own blood? And for her own part she watches with solicitude all that passes in the family whose name she bears. Is the new bride received among them? From her own diminishing store of jewels will be sent some trifle, maybe only a couple of tiny gold jasmine flowers for the ears, by the bereaved to the newly wedded daughter-in-law. Or she hears of sickness and arrives to nurse. She comes to wait on the aged, or will assume charge of the young while grave elders go on pilgrimage. All this implies a network of social ideals that tends to make it difficult to divert the income arising from alliance. Over and above her alleged common sense, on the other hand, an estate that passes into the hands of a woman ruler enjoys the economic advantage of her freedom from personal extravagance, for the energy with which a widow pursues after abstinence is extraordinary. To this day she lives in an ancient India, created by her own habits. In Calcutta she drinks only Ganges water, holding that the municipal supply is contaminated by European use. She will eat only rock salt in order to avoid the pollution of manufacturing processes. When ill, she accepts treatment only from the old Indian doctors, the Vaidya or the Kaviraj, and pays fantastic sums for their medicines if they come from Benares or some other seat of classic learning. If well, she eats one meal of cooked food prepared with her own hands at or after midday, and only a slight refection of milk, fruit, and unleavened bread at nightfall. Her hair is cut short, or in some parts of India the head is shaved, perhaps originally to remove the temptation of beauty, but as far as custom knows and questions, only that she may bathe the more frequently and easily, every bathing conveying to her the notion of a baptism. Such is her ordinary routine. Her occasional dissipations consist in a pilgrimage, an extra visit to a temple at dawn or after sunset, or attendance at some ceremony of epic recitation. Is it not well said that she knows no extravagance? It is because her life is holier than that of others that no hand must touch her food, though she may prepare and serve the meals of any in the house. For the same reason, if questions of precedence arise, she stands higher than married women. Did she not rise before dawn to tell her beads, or to sit for an hour in meditation? Then, when her room was cleaned and ordered, did she not go down to the river for the morning bath, returning with the wet sari that she had washed according to daily custom with her own hands? Did she not don the silken garment and pass to that ceremonial worship with flowers and offerings that lasts for at least an hour or more? And only when that worship was ended could she begin to think of cooking her meal. With the waning of the afternoon she falls again to telling her beads, right hand and rosary both concealed in a little bag. At the moment of candlelight she passes once more into actual meditation. Then an hour's chat, the frugal evening meal, and so to bed, to begin at dawn on the morrow again the daily round. An incomparable moment in the history of a Hindu family is that of the return to it of a young daughter freshly widowed. Unspeakable tenderness and delicacy are lavished on her. A score of reasons for the mitigation of her rule are thought out and urged. In spite of her reluctance, the parents or parents-in-law will insist. Sometimes the whole family will adopt her austere method of living for a few months, and keep pace with her self-denials step by step, till she herself discovers and breaks the spell. "Well, well," exclaimed an old father, brooding over the ruin of his child's happiness at such a crisis. "It was high time for me to retire from the world. Can we not renounce together, little mother?" And while she is supported by her father's strong arm, the mother's wings are open wide, to fold closer than ever before the bird that has flown home with the arrow in its heart. Indeed, this union of theirs has become proverbial, so that if some small son be uncommonly helpful and chivalrous to his mother, friendly neighbors will say in banter, "But this is no boy. This is surely your widowed daughter, mother." So pass the years till, it may be, the mother, herself widowed, becomes a child, falling back upon the garnered strength of her own daughter. Life ebbs, but discipline gathers its perfect fruit in lives stately and grave and dignified, for all their simplicity and bareness, in characters that are the hidden strength alike of village and of nation, in an ideal of sainthood justified, an opportunity of power created. In the long years of her mature life we picture the Madonna standing always beneath the cross. And we are right. But patience, not forever shall she stand thus. It shall yet come to pass that in high heaven a day shall dawn, on which, wearing the selfsame meekness, clothed in the selfsame humility, the Mother of Sorrows shall be crowned, and that by her own Son. End of chapter 4.